Good everybody, my name's Kath. I'm from Wellington, New Zealand, and my topic is gender. What is it and why do we care so much about it? So welcome. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is what does gender mean and how can we all improve our gender bias in the language we use around gender. So let's dive right in. Okay. Gender norms are informal rules that our society imposes upon us and we feel an immense amount of pressure to follow. So an easy example for this is to think about what we might use when we talk about girls or boys. So for boys, we might use words like strong and brave. And for girls, we might use words like pretty or intelligent, clever, friendly, those kind of things. Gender norms and those informal rules are really, really hard to pin down because they're different in all societies, but also they're so unwritten that they're just expected over time. So it's really difficult to identify them. But the challenge is when we can identify them, what we can do is we can change our behaviour. If we can't identify them, it makes it much more difficult to change or challenge behaviour. So gender norms are things like what we might say are boys like video games or girls just love pink. Now I want to just talk a little bit about the highlighted area that I've got on this slide that says all genders. What we know now from research is that we don't have a binary around gender. So we don't have are you a boy or are you a girl? What we've got is a continuum. And so on that continuum, instead of like a yes or no, up, down, that's a binary. Well, continuum means that you sit somewhere along there. So if this end is boys and this end is girls, you might be strongly at this end if you identify as female or girl, feminine. You might be masculine or male over here, but you might also sit somewhere along the middle. So you might not have a very strong gender bias either way. Okay. Kerry Robinson has written about how children in particular learn really, really quickly how to act in their gender bias way. So they get messages from the environment and they get messages from their community and they get messages from their families. So an easy example about this is thinking about department stores or shops that have a section that says girls clothing and boys clothing. Now that might seem sensible, it might seem like a good orderly way of doing things, but if you are a young child who would really love to wear a unicorn tutu, but your gender is a boy, you're quickly told this is the side that you go to. And by default, you're also told that that side's not available to you because this is your side. And so that's some of the messages that we get from the environment. We can also get little messages from people in our community. So if you were a boy that was young and wearing nail polish, you might go out into your community and someone says, oh, why are you wearing nail polish? Or what does your dad think about you wearing nail polish? Those are all gendered conversations or gendered messages that we get. Now, they're not going to, one message is not going to impact significantly, but that one message is never alone by itself. So the accumulation of all those messages starts to tell us how we need to act if we identify as female and how we need to act if we identify as male. So take for a minute the next provocation that I've got for you when somebody is pregnant, and one of the things that they very frequently get asked is, are you having a boy or a girl? Do you know the gender of your baby? Now this is interesting because what I see frequently is once we know the gender of the baby, our questions then change depending on what that gender is. So we might think about a female baby, so we might say, oh, having a wee girl. So then someone all of a sudden wants to buy a doll, wants to buy a pink outfit, wants to buy a bow for the hair, that kind of stuff. If we say we're having a boy baby, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, let's get him some shorts and a t-shirt, let's get him a truck. Now, a really good point for me to make right now is this is not everybody, okay? So if you're sitting here thinking, I don't do that, that's awesome. I'm really, really pleased for you. That is excellent. What I'm suggesting here is that this is more common than uncommon, and this is the part we need to challenge. And because it's so common, we often don't challenge it because we don't know what's happening, okay? So I've seen a funny little thing that said, I'm not having a boy or a girl, I'm having a dinosaur. And that when the parent said this, everybody was all completely confused. So when we start to think about pregnancy and asking about the gender of the child, and then the language and the behaviour shifting depending on which gender that child is, we can see then how children are conditioned from the start. So when a person has a baby and that baby's identified as female, we talk soft to that baby. We talk about nurturing concepts. If the baby's a boy, we talk about baby being brave and strong and going to grow up and do all these different kind of things than if that baby was a girl. So gender pronouns, I just want to talk a little bit about this, and I do also want to say that this is a very quick talk, and gender is massive, and it is connected all around with a whole bunch of other things with it. So if you're interested in knowing more, do your own research and have a wee look. And I encourage you to do that. So I'm not by any stretch of the imagination covering everything today. But gender means the innate sense of how we feel inside on the continuum, like I talked about before, of male to female. Gender means what you identify as. So gender is fluid, not binary. So we've already talked about that binary is not the up and down part. Gender doesn't mean your genitalia, so what you have between your legs, that's different. And it doesn't mean who you're attracted to. So let's have a look at the next slide. So that's easier to see. So this is the gingerbread man, and if you are interested, one of the things you can think about is going to see, it's pronounced metrosexual, and that's on your screen, and this is the work of Sam Killerman. He's excellent. He's an amazing person that kind of breaks down into really easy to understand things, ideas around gender, ideas around orientation, ideas around how we express ourselves. So you can see the genderbread person, has identity coming out their brain. So the brain is the part that tells you what your gender identity is. What do I think I am? So for me, I think I am female, I identify as female. Then the orientation is your sexual orientation. So who do you feel attracted to? Who do you feel like you would like to have as your sweetheart? And for some people, that's the same sexual sex as them, and for some people that's different. Then your expression, so the piece going around the outside of the genderbread person, is how you express yourself. How do you present yourself to the world? And these are 4 separate areas, and that's one thing that we need to kind of keep remembering, that our identity and how we present ourselves might be different. We might have to wear a uniform for work, and that uniform might present in a particular gender, but we believe we're a different gender. So quite hard to kind of pin down, and it's complex. So you're sitting here thinking, I'm talking too fast, there's too much information, this is getting confusing. Just take a moment, you can watch this again, but also go to Sam Killerman, go to It's Pronounced Metrosexual, and have a little look around. There's lots of information there that can support your journey. So one of the challenges is sorting and identifying people by gender. And I want to acknowledge first that this is easy. This is an easy thing to do. So teachers will often say, all the boys line up here, all the girls line up here. We sort people by gender in public by using female bathrooms and male bathrooms. The tricky thing with sorting people by gender is it's a little bit weird, because we can sort people by a whole bunch of other things and we don't. But a person might have a different gender than what they outwardly look like. So they might feel inside in their brain that their gender is different than how they have to present to the world. And living that lie or that discombobulation, that turmoil inside them is really challenging. And if we don't have to sort people by gender, then it makes them a little bit calmer. Gender's taught based on what you physically look like. So here's one real big challenge. If you are a male with long hair, that's often mistaken. You can often be mistaken for a female. Or if you are a female with very short hair, often you can be mistaken for a male. So young children that have long hair are often identified as female or girls, and if a child has very short hair, they're often identified as a boy. Now that's just the physical appearance, so that's that bullet point 2. So we're taught that a particular way of looking is this female and another particular way of looking is male, and there's kind of no in between. And I want to challenge that because gender discrimination is something that many people experience, and this will be different in a whole bunch of countries all around the world. So you can do some of your own reflection about what gender discrimination looks like where you live. But for me, sometimes gender discrimination looks like not being offered the same job opportunities, not being offered the same promotions within an organisation. And in New Zealand, our experience also is that we're not offered the same pay rate. So if we identify as female, we're doing the same job as a man, often we're not offered the same pay rate as them. Now this is a little hard slide to talk about, but I want you to think about the implications of people having internal conflict about what they think their gender is, what they physically present as, and what their genitalia is. And this statistic is from 2008, so it's actually quite old now, but it says 32 children in the United States of America a day try or attempt suicide, and 4 a day are successful as a direct result of questioning their sexuality or being teased or marginalised by others because of it. So this is not all people that attempt suicide or successfully suicide. This is just this percentage here that their suicide attempts are directly related to gender, to their confusion around gender or to their people teasing them around gender or their marginalisation around gender. So that's pretty significant. So I just want to touch a little bit more on the gender is taught based on what people physically look like. And I found this picture as a way of kind of explaining, hopefully, to you some of the conflicts. So this is a person that has a beard. They've also got makeup on their eyes and purple lipstick. And oftentimes the lipstick and the makeup on the eyes is considered to be something exclusively for women, and a beard is usually exclusively for males. So the pressure to conform to societal norms is really high, and we do that by moderating each other. So we say things like, oh, that's a bit feminine, isn't it, to a man that might be wearing something in a colour that could be considered female. And so what we're doing is we're controlling them. We're giving them little messages that say, don't wear lipstick, don't wear a pink shirt, those kind of things. So having a think about how our language is and thinking about in our society, what defines a girl and what defines a boy, and then starting to break that down a little bit too. So this is my challenge to you. I'm asking you to question and reformulate about how to teach and reinforce gendered practices in your everyday interactions. And this is going to be hard, and the next slide's got a few little ideas. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the gender awareness raising pedagogy, bit hard to say. But the idea here is to challenge young children in particular, that's how we make our changes, about what they perceive to be okay for boys to do and what they perceive is okay for girls to do, and kind of just break those challenges down a little bit. So when a child says, oh, boys can't wear nail polish, you could say, actually, boys have nails at the end of their hands, and technically they can wear nail polish. If they choose not to, that's great. But actually, the reality is, yes, they can. So here's a couple of little points for you to consider. So practice. Don't worry if you get it wrong, keep persisting. You can think about, rather than saying, oh, she's got a nice dress on today, you can say, they have a nice dress on today. The she, her pronouns and the he, him pronouns define us by our gender. Whereas if we use they and them, leaves it open a little bit. So if you meet someone for the first time and they identify as female and they present as female, rather than saying, what's your husband's name, you could say, what's your partner's name? Or you could ask a question that means that you can open up the idea that their partner might have a different gender or the same gender as the person you're talking to. So they and them are two easy ways of not getting too trapped. So practice, have a little go, think about it being some safe environments. If it's not safe in your family to challenge gender norms, then don't do it there, do it somewhere else. Write down your achievements. So you can keep a little diary about some of the things that you're doing well and some of your pitfalls. So when you're practicing something like this, it's a little bit like learning a new language. And when you're learning a new language, you're going to default to the original language, and then you're going to go, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to be trying this thing different now. So just kind of go back and say, oh yeah, let me try this thing different now. Writing down your achievements means that you can flip back through what you've written down and say, oh, I can see some really lovely progress here. Share with others while you're changing your language. So one key point about sharing with other people is you can bring them on board for you. So you can say, hey, I'm really looking at changing my language around how I describe young girls and young boys. I've noticed that I say pretty and cute for girls, and I say strong and brave for boys, and I want to change that up a little bit. So feel free to call me on it if I make a mistake, or feel free to call me on it if I go back to those brave boys and those cute girls. Just stop using boys and girls. That's one way we can try and do things. So instead of saying, okay, boys and girls, if you're a teacher or if you're in a teaching environment, you could say, okay, team, or okay, everybody, or back to me, or ding ding, something that kind of helps children come back to you without kind of closing that binary of boys and girls. So thank you for listening, everybody. My name's Kath. I'm from New Zealand in Wellington, New Zealand, and it's been an absolute pleasure to put this presentation together. So I would really like to acknowledge the opportunity that I've been presented here. If you would like to know more, you're welcome to look me up, Kath Cooper, and also the other resource that I talked about was Sam Killerman. It's pronounced metrosexual, and he's got a wealth of knowledge that I draw upon, in particular the gingerbread person. So, hey Cornada, which is goodbye for now, and we'll talk real soon.